I'm Michael Johnson, and I beat the often path by helping to facilitate the legal cannabis supply chain.
Is the green rush over? Are NFTs still a thing? Was it wrong of me to put my life savings into AMC stock? Michael Johnson is the CEO of Metrc, a company that makes supply chain software for the cannabis industry. Now, if talking about cannabis bothers you, I suggest you tune out right now. This is one of those businesses that makes sense when you learn about it, but it seems so out of left field for an uneducated person such as myself. Today we discuss the cannabis industry boom and maturation of the green rush as what was once an emerging field becomes more commonplace. Metrc has over 250,000 users for their track and trace software program, and they're trying to bring safety and oversight to the wild west of the cannabis space. So what does this mean for you? Well, the next time you buy an edible from the store, you can trust that it's safe thanks to Metrc, and who doesn't want that? So here's Michael Johnson, I'm Ross Palmer, and this is Beat the Often Path. Well, welcome to the show, Michael. That was perfect. You did a great intro. The question is this. What kind of business is this, and where did the idea come from? I'm always fascinated with business models that I can't even imagine why they existed or how they existed, and this is definitely one of those. So where did this all begin?
First of all, I appreciate you having me on, and happy to share everything I can with you about myself and about Metrc, and certainly the process here. Metrc is we're actually the software that creates the regulatory backbone of the legal cannabis ecosystem in the United States. And so we represent nearly 70% of all states that have legal cannabis operations. Within them, we create the software and technological ecosystem for which all of the cannabis in the supply chain is tracked, measured, tested, and really creates the best foundation for protecting public health.
So for the people who don't understand, myself included, what is the issue? I mean, I think we can all understand that when you take an unregulated market and then try to bring it into something that's regulated, there's going to be all kinds of issues and a lot of standards and practices that need to be added that just weren't there before. So what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and how does that work? And what would have happened without Metrc, for example?
It's an interesting kind of a thing to think about, because there's not a lot of industries that were sort of function, but in a legal sense, and have been converted not only into a legal industry, but initially and in many cases primarily as a medical industry. And so you're taking something that wasn't legal, not only are you regulating it, but you're also putting it into a lexicon that supports the use by patients that have to generally get some sort of a medical card, which is something unto and totally above and beyond what anybody who's doing the illegal market, in addition to just basic commerce. And so what Metrc essentially is able to do is able to pull in all the different players in the supply chain. And supply chain in and of itself is a little bit of a misnomer, because it's not so much of a chain as it is more of almost like a supply network or supply mesh. When you grow a plant, depending on how you grow it, could produce anything anywhere from a few ounces to some plants in Northern California can produce in excess of 100 pounds, which is wild. And you harvest that plant. The flower that you harvest, the cannabis that you can harvest, could go a variety of different places. It could all get harvested, put in the same box, and sent to somebody else, and they take everything that you've harvested. It could also be broken into multiple different pieces and sent to different buyers of that product for different use cases. So whether it's processing the cannabis flower into some kind of an oil or a concentrate, or folks that are taking the flower and breaking it apart and putting it into pre-rolls, there's no shortage of different applications that folks have for cannabis. And as you can imagine, because of the challenges, I think, with trying to set up a brand new market, but also navigating something that is still federally illegal, you want to have the appropriate levels of safeguards in place to protect public health, protect children, protect any number of different folks that might come in contact with cannabis, because as I think some people forget, it is a psychoactive substance, and there's not a whole lot of those that are available without a prescription or something like that. And so what we're able to do, and what Metrc has really become the leader of, is creating an ecosystem to where every step along the way, what we refer to from seed to ultimate retail sale, is tracked. And that helps facilitate really good visibility for regulators to help make sure that the properly tested and safe product is available. But it also allows regulators and folks that are in states where legal cannabis can be consumed to have the peace of mind that the infrastructure to be proactive, to do perhaps a recall, or to ensure that packaging rules and guidelines are met, that this functionality exists.
What do you think about the cannabis space in general? Because I'm fascinated with the concept of bubbles and these giant emerging markets. I mean, every once in a while, a new market comes along, something completely changes, and then you have this gold rush where everybody rushes in and they want to be a part of it. NFT craze of a couple years ago, even Ethereum, Bitcoin, like every so often there's a new craze. And it's been very clear that the legalization of cannabis has created with it this incredible Wild West gold rush thing. We're several years into that, and it's becoming more of a mature market. And I think that speaks to the reason that your company exists and is so successful. But how do you see the space evolving and growing now? Is the bubble bursting? Is the bubble just changing? What's going on with the market in general?
It's a great question, and especially in California, where you're at some of the more mature states, in particular the states that Metrc represents, California, Oregon, Colorado. You're experiencing the effects of, call it a burst bubble, call it some kind of a retraction or a right sizing. Everybody's got a fun little piece of jargon for it. That's normal, and it's certainly, I think, an element of it that's painful, and I definitely feel for any of the farmers, processors, distributors, dispensaries that are not doing as well as they would like. Unfortunately, that is an effect of a free market system. And so you get in a situation where a lot of folks think they can make a bunch of money on something, and they're going to kind of stake their claim. And unfortunately, there's only so many people in each state, and there's only so much for everyone. And so that kind of ebb and flow, that up and down, we see it in every industry. We see it in the stock market. And I think where we're at in the industry right now is a maturing. And you've got folks that I think started in the industry with not a lot of experience, because outside of the illegal market, there's not a whole lot of anyone on the planet that had a lot of experience with cannabis and cannabis commerce. And we have folks that came in and they tried an approach, and some folks were much more successful with their approach. And we've got no shortage of examples of companies out there that are still being experiencing wild profitability and really massive growth. And of course, there's a number of folks that haven't made it. And so our objective is to try and help facilitate an environment where, in those ebbs and flows, when people are struggling, they're still able to find a way to be compliant in the most frictionless way possible. And I would be the first one to admit that Metrc wasn't, certainly in the beginning was a little bit more challenging for folks, I think, to grab onto. But the industry itself is like no other. And so I do look at what Metrc has been able to provide as the backbone for the commercial activity that's been able to occur legally, as really that foundation for these businesses that are able to be successful to continue to be successful. More credibility, more comfort that the public has in the legal market, the more the legal market will grow. And so I look at Metrc as continuing to kind of work towards learning some of the lessons, or helping folks in states that are less mature see some of the lessons and recognize that they too are in their own green rush. And they too will experience a little bit of a normalization in terms of folks that won't be able to make it as the market matures and we get a lot more experience. I think a lot of us forget that the market overall is really not much more than a decade old. And it's really in its infancy of what the market will become 30, 40, 50 years from now.
Do you think that a lot of the players that are in there, that you basically have to be more serious as a business person to succeed in an industry where maybe a few years ago, again, anybody thought I could just get $100,000 and get rich quick? Do you think that that's no longer the case, and it's kind of selecting out those types of entrepreneurs?
Absolutely, 100%. Just like any other industry, when you get into something brand new, you're able to charge significant premiums. When there's not a lot of inventory out there, find yourself in a tough spot. I mean, parts of California and Oregon and Colorado, at some point in the beginning, folks are getting $5,000 a pound. Parts of last year on a wholesale market. Last year, you saw that dip in some cases below $500 a pound. And so if you're getting, if you're selling something for $5,000 a pound, you're making a lot of money. And it doesn't really matter that you have the most efficient processes and you have the most automated, systems and folks. You would not think that you have to spend a lot of time being, this real big advocate of precision agriculture like you would if you're farming corn or bib lettuce. But we see folks that do. And so in applying a lot of the functionality that I think Metrc brings to the table, specifically in the use of RFID, which is the standard in agriculture, the opportunity for folks to really create massive precision in their supply chain processes certainly exists. I'm not sure that many are taking advantage of that in the same way that they could. But if RFID is ubiquitous in bib lettuce and you're getting less than $10 for a case and sticking an RFID tag on it, and you look in a plant could be producing still thousands of dollars of value to you, it's definitely a massive benefit, and folks really can take advantage of that. I think many have not, and I think that's a big miss. But again, if you're as wildly profitable as many of these businesses started, is that something that you really need to spend your time on, or is your focus really on trying to expand as quickly as possible and grab as much market share as possible? And so we're in a situation where the market becomes quite saturated, and the existing processes to produce product that's the highest quality and in the most cost conscious way, that hasn't necessarily been the focus hand in hand. I would argue that quality certainly has been there, especially in California and Colorado. There's a massive focus on quality, and I think they've earned a reputation appropriately. But in terms of really trying to figure out on a plant by plant basis how you're able to produce an additional 10 grams per harvest, I'm not sure that that's ubiquitous. And an additional 10 grams per harvest per plant for the average farmer could be the difference between survival and bankruptcy.
Right, especially at scale when you've got gigantic operations. So for those who are entrepreneurial and who have looked at this, maybe it's not the hot industry that it was a couple of years ago, or maybe people are looking elsewhere who are looking for that next quick thing. I've seen at a distance the types of business that entrepreneurs wanted to start, how it changed. In the beginning, somebody maybe wanted to grow and sell that product, but then they realized that price came down. So then they said, okay, maybe I'll create seeds and then I can sell those seeds to somebody else who can grow at scale. And then maybe they said, okay, that's also oversaturated. Now I'm going to create concentrates on a personal scale because I can take a whole bunch of products and I can make a sellable concentrate with ultra premium, make stuff like resin, rosin, all of that stuff. And then maybe they say, I'm going to create equipment or sell these things. So the concept of where somebody who's entrepreneurial jumps in, I've noticed that it changes. And the idea of what makes money has also changed in the industry. What do you think that the opportunity is now for an entrepreneurial minded person in the industry? And where do you think that the opportunity definitely isn't for somebody who's trying to break in?
Great question. I mean, we ask ourselves that all the time so that we can try and be as flexible and as agile to change into what will help support the industry as we can. We're primarily a government contractor, so we're not really marketing so much to licensees, to the growers, but they are in many ways still our customer. And even though we're not necessarily providing like the next great widget for them, they are a customer, and our responsibility as an enterprise level software solution for them is to evaluate where they are having the biggest gaps and where they might have trouble being successful. And so from a Metrc perspective, I look and I would encourage anybody to get really deep into finding ways that can help bring forward precision agriculture and the techniques in precision agriculture to the cannabis space. Because as folks get much more efficient in terms of farming, in terms of being able to harvest bigger, more quality, sometimes some folks really just care a lot about a high THC bloom. There's a variety of different things that I think folks can get a lot better at, and we just don't see it. And so in providing the RFID tags for folks, literally every plant has the opportunity to be evaluated, and there's so many data points on a per plant basis through the harvest cycle, and so many opportunities to really maximize that yield. I highly recommend anybody get involved there, because that's going to be the difference. Pricing, as you get more supply, wholesale pricing, the market's going to push down pricing. There is some level of equilibrium, absolutely. But at that point, once you reach that point of equilibrium, then it's a race to see how people can do it in the most profitable way. And if you can get ahead of that race, because I definitely think you're starting to see it in Colorado, Oregon, and California, but you're going to see it before long in Michigan, Massachusetts, Illinois, and some of the other states. And so if you can get there and produce something as an entrepreneur, I think you could be very, very successful.
So I'll let you wrap up this episode. I've got a little question for you. So what is something that you personally believe that not everybody believes? What's something that you believe that most people wouldn't believe?
I believe that your mistakes are really what build your character. And so we talk a lot here about perfection is not necessarily attainable. It's not necessarily the goal either. The journey is the way. I believe strongly in a number of Stoic principles, way or water. And so continuing to move down that path. But I have a lot of conversation with folks, and it seems like it's a trendy thing to talk about, but I don't think a lot of people believe it. And if you really get into it, you really recognize that the obstacle is the way, to quote
Ryan Holiday. Yes. Marcus Aurelius. Yes.
Yeah, there is, and there genuinely is, I think, a much higher level of satisfaction and a much higher purpose in anything that you're working towards.
Yep. Well, that's a very noble goal. May we all attain it in our work and lives and beyond. Where can people support your company and find out more about what you do?
Yeah, Metrc.com, Metrc.com is our website. We're in the government space, so I would not describe our social presence in the same way that many others might, but we're certainly available on LinkedIn. Anybody can reach me at any time. My email address is michael.johnson@metrc.com. And I'm happy to connect with anybody, and I really just can't thank you enough for welcoming me on the program and for creating an opportunity for folks to learn more about Metrc.
Well, it's my pleasure to get to know you, and thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to sit down with me. And with that, the official podcast is over.